Curious about internships, breaking into public service, or working as a congressional aide before you graduate? All that and more coming up next. Hey Honors Bulls! Welcome back to the Honor Roll podcast, the flagship podcast of the Judy Genscheft Honors College Podcast Network. I'm your host, Riva Gandhi, a fourth year studying biomedical sciences and public health with a minor in nutrition. Today, my co-host is Lily Belcher, a fourth year majoring in mass communications and professional and technical communications. Thanks for being here, Lily.
Thanks so much for having me on. It's great to do this again before I graduate.
I know, and it's coming up soon. I'm very excited for you.
Me too.
So, as always, we like to start off our podcast with one big question. So my question this week is, are internships really the key to success after college, or are they just a checkbox on the resume?
I think it really depends on the major. I think some majors are dependent on you getting experience in college, and others, you can't get those internships until you have a degree. So I think it really depends on the field you're in.
I would agree and disagree with that. I think it does depend on the major, but I think it also helps you explore. Because for me, I wouldn't have discovered public health had I not found this random internship because I needed experience, and it led me to adding on a whole different major and finding why I'm passionate about what I'm doing. So I think that's very special to have. And I think that passion is really hard to find with a lot of honors students. And this week, we're excited to have honors student Cameran Isler here to share her experience developing vital career skills through the Legislative and Tallahassee Internship Programs here at USF. Stay tuned.
Hi Honors Bulls, my name is Dan Nguyen and I'm an academic advisor here at the Judy Genscheft Honors College. My advice to seniors is simple. Explore boldly. This is the moment to step beyond what's familiar to you. Try something that stretches you, whether that's a challenging course, a research opportunity, or a study abroad trip, or a career path you've been curious about or unsure of. Growth doesn't happen in your comfort zone, and you're more capable than you realize. Take a leap, you'll thank yourself later. Thank you so much for listening, and back to the episode.
It's great having you on the podcast today, Cameran. Would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Cameran Isler, and I'm a junior at USF studying philosophy. I currently work for Congresswoman Laurel Lee, who's a member of the U.S. House of Representatives, and I also work as a fellow for the Florida Debate Initiative, and I'm also the VP of Professional Development and Alumni Relations for the Dean Student Leadership Society.
And so you're also part of the Honors College. Tell me a little bit about how that's helped you get to all of those accomplishments so far.
I would actually say that the Honors College contributed a lot to my professional and academic success. I started college at USF not doing honors. I thought that it was different than it actually was, that it was accelerated coursework like it was in high school. So I didn't bother to apply to it. But when I realized what it was, encouraging people to be interdisciplinary and higher achievers, I submitted an application after my first year, and I had to go through that whole process, and I got in, and I was so happy. And being that I entered in late, I really decided that I had to make the most out of the opportunity to make up for that 1 year that I wasn't in it. So I discovered the Legislative Internship Program and the Tallahassee Internship Program, LIP and TIP, and there's a story behind that, but it was primarily targeted to honor students in their public policy internships, and that really changed my trajectory.
That's really cool. So if it wasn't the honors college that got you interested in USF, what was your starting point that you decided to choose USF for?
So being that I'm paying for college by myself, the tuition at USF was the most reasonable for my financial situation. And I also got to be close to my parents because they live in Florida. And those were the two most important factors in choosing what college I went to. So that's why I picked USF.
And so tell me how you first got interested in public service.
So I am a former speech and debate kid, and I did it all of high school. I was the president, and there were numerous programs that supported us in our education. I got to go on this field trip to the Florida Capitol because I placed at the national competition. And while I was there, they let us meet the governor. They let us take pictures on the old Capitol steps and gave us this whole tour. It was very beautiful and monumental for my life, just having that opportunity to go. And there, I actually realized that the people that funded and staffed the trip, the field trip to go up there, and all of the speech and debate programs that I had been participating in, all of those people are public servants. And I was just raised in a way that you should treat others the way you want to be treated. And if there's goodness in the world, you should try to preserve it and keep it going. So it was kind of natural. I didn't decide one day I want to help people. It was more like I was helped and this is what you should do. So I continue to give back to the debate community through the Florida Debate Initiative, and public service has always just been a constant in my goals because I have been publicly serviced to get to the point that I'm at now.
I love that outlook, like passing it on to the next person. I think that's so amazing. Now, you mentioned you were a philosophy major. How does that relate to public service and how has that changed your perspective?
I started as a political science
Mhm.
major. I was very interested in history in high school, and that was just kind of natural to me, or so I thought. And I started taking political science classes, and it was very informative. I love learning. I'm a huge learner. That's actually a very important theme that I just am so knowledge hungry. But in my political science classes, it was more of understanding history and ideology and theories. And what I wanted to learn, because I already knew all the history, I was a huge history person in high school. So I just felt like I wasn't getting what I wanted out of the classes that I was taking. So I took Intro to Philosophy, and not an understatement, but it changed my life. The professor's name was Leif Jacobson, and he, in one class, in the first half of the class, he proved that God had to exist. And then in the second half of the class, he debunked all of the arguments that he set up in the first class. And I remember walking out of the class and crying because I've never been challenged to think that hard about something. And then that week, I changed my major to philosophy. And how that ties in with my public service is conflict management. There
Mm.
are so many situations. This is why the world has problems, because there's conflict. People disagree. But if you're well versed on literature and perspectives from people that have spent their whole lives thinking about that, it really helps inform decision making and helps me de-escalate conflicts in the professional world.
I know you just kind of answered part of that, but going back to your two internships with the Legislative Internship Program and the Tallahassee Internship Program,
hmm
you mentioned this love of public service and that love of learning and that conflict resolution. Tell me about how those internship programs have let you lean into that thing that you're so passionate about.
hmm So I'm going to tell you the story of how I landed in lip and tip in the first place. So I was actually scouring Handshake on USF for a position, and I wanted this executive position at Cyber Florida. And have you guys heard of Cyber Florida?
Mhm.
And I was one of two applicants that was trying to get the job, and I did not get the job, and I really thought I was going to. They were hyping me up. I was so confident, and I got that rejection email, and I was like, wow. And the person who rejected me actually called me, and he was like, the only reason I didn't accept you is because you don't have the experience that the other person had. And I was like, well, shoot. And he made me aware of the lip and tip programs at USF, and they were being marketed to honor students specifically. And he told me he knew the organizer and would put in good word for me. And that day I applied, and I read the acceptance email as I was taking off to go to Germany. And so my Wi-Fi was actually cutting out, and I just so happened to open my email and I saw the acceptance, and it was like this life-changing moment. So I applied to both programs, got in both programs. The Legislative Internship Program is where locally in the Tampa Bay community, students are placed with a elected official or education, something in the public sector or a lobbying firm, and we all have class at USF. It's under Ron Pierce. That's the name of the person, the professor who organizes this. And we all have a class where we can talk about our experiences and learn about Florida politics. And it was really good because what one person was experiencing at their internship might have been so amazing and awesome, but at another person's internship, they might have just been sorting papers. So hearing what the other person is doing in their class can inspire this person to go back and say, hey, like, I know this, and this needs to be done, and this is what they're doing in my class. Do you think that I could do this as well? And I actually did that myself. I was noticing that people were going out into the field and doing meetings in my class, and I was just in the office at first, but I asked and I received. I got to go out into the field. So that was an amazing opportunity. I was placed in Congresswoman Lee's office. They matched you based on what you were interested in. And I said in the interview I was interested in AI, and she was on the AI task force at the time. So when I came into the office, everyone was like, everyone said, this intern is interested in AI, so ask her all the AI questions, and it made me feel very special. And then the Tallahassee Internship Program takes place during the legislative session. So before the legislative session, we have a class where we learn very intensively what goes on in the Florida legislature during sessions. So about bills and what the silos are, like healthcare, education, agriculture, things like that, and who the key players are as well. And then that's here, we have that class here, and then they pay for us to live in Tallahassee and be interns for the members in session. And every House member has only one intern, and I didn't know that going into this. So I walked into the office on the first day, and I was the only intern for the member, and so I had to do pretty much all of the work that my supervisor had to do as well. And I just wasn't really expecting that. So being thrown with the sharks was very good for my growth then. And what I did in those internships was answer phone calls, sort mail to constituents. In the Tallahassee Internship Program, I was matched with Rep. Karen Gonzalez Pittman, and my supervisor is USF alum William Kirkpatrick. There, I got to take stakeholder meetings. So people would come up to the Capitol and do their advocacy, and me as an intern got to take the meetings and hear about them. One of them was the Florida dentists were advocating against getting rid of the fluoride in our water. And I got to take that meeting, and that was just huge for my growth as well. Just having the confidence of knowing that I did that. So it was very good for me.
How does that experience kind of inspire your outlook for your career now? You're a college student still and looking towards those next steps. Did those two programs change what you came into college wanting to do?
I would say yes. So at the Tallahassee Internship Program during session, I got a call from the boss from the Legislative Internship Program. So the boss at Laurel Lee's office, his name is Danny, and he called me and he told me that there was an open position with the office. So at my second internship, my first internship offered me a job as a congressional aide. So that was the best call I think I've ever gotten, and I absolutely jumped at the opportunity to do that. And now I say this quote that the hardest part about living the dream is that you have to find a new dream. And people ask me all the time, being young and I have a job, their natural inclination is to say, so what's next? What's your dream? And I have absolutely no idea. But my internships, being an intern and experiencing different bosses and different environments really informed my perspective on giving back as well for educational opportunities. Now I'm actually the intern manager in Congresswoman Lee's office, and I manage on average 15 interns every semester. And I use what I learned in Lip and Tip as an intern and having all my intern friends in my cohort to be a good manager. Or I try the best I can.
Yeah, that feels like a full circle moment there where
Absolutely.
you went from being an intern to now managing it. But working with Congresswoman Laurel Lee, what does a typical day look like for you?
So a typical day for me depends on whether we're event heavy that particular month, but I'll go in, check my emails. I get a bunch of emails every day from everyone under the sun. Even people internationally will email us because she's a member and they find my email somehow. But once I sort through that, we do constituent casework in our office. So our job responsibilities are actually enshrined in the Constitution, where it says in the First Amendment, every citizen has the right to petition their government about grievances against the government. And so what that means is someone that lives in our district is a constituent, and if they have a problem with a federal agency like Social Security, IRS, the VA, if they have to get their military disability benefits, that sort of issue, then they could call our office and we would open up a case and we would send whatever agency they have a problem with, their question or whatever their problem is. And then the agency liaison will communicate with us, and they tend to get quicker responses if we get involved. And so right now I'm sitting at around 30 cases, but other members of staff have hundreds of cases. So it depends on how much people are in need, because we do specialize in different areas of casework. So I do Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, Office of Personnel Management, FBI. We also have community events. So for example, we recently had our Service Academy Information Day, and that took place here at USF, where high school seniors who were interested in going to a service academy like West Point or the Naval Academy, if you want to go to one of those academies, you have to have a congressional nomination or vice president or the secretary or something like that. So we have our own nomination process. So everyone who's interested in that came to this day, and our office basically told them and their parents what the requirements were, what the deadlines were, the criteria for even going to a service academy. So things like that. We serve the community through the service academies, and we also have had a passport fair this year, also here at USF. We had that in the Health Sciences Library. I think that was in May. And yeah, that's just when we get very busy, when we have to organize those community events. I'm support for a lot of those events. So we do casework, events, and when people have legislative concerns, they can still call us, and we draft the response into something that we can send to our legislative team so they can review and give them a response back. So if you have a problem with anything the government does, then our office is available to take your opinion, try to get your problem solved, and provide those services to you.
So you've highlighted a lot of varying responsibilities at your job, and I'm sure that comes with its own set of joys and challenges. So what has been your favorite part of your job, and what has been the most challenging thing?
My favorite part of my job is such an easy question to answer. Something that I really like about working in the district office versus maybe working in DC is that within months, you're able to see your work come to completion and actually help a person with something that could literally change their lives. And in DC, you could have a very good policy proposal. This could be what you've worked on all of your life and what you're passionate about, but it could take years and multiple administrations to see your bill come to completion. But for example, a disabled veteran might have put his social security number wrong on a form, and he doesn't know because he might be very old. And our office can step in and try to help figure out that discrepancy and get him what he's looking for. And the calls we get back of people being so grateful and thankful for our help make every day so worth it. But I will say something that I found unexpected about my job, and I wouldn't say that I dislike this aspect, but it was just very interesting coming into it. I learned how much the member herself, Laurel Lee, works, and it eliminates any and all excuses that I might have for being tired, having a stomach ache, having emergencies. Members aren't really allowed to have emergencies because then the press is like, oh, why aren't they voting? Why aren't they sitting in committee? What's wrong? And your whole life is on blast, so you can't really have anything personal. And so it was huge perspective for me when I'm feeling tired and in bed. I am reminded that the Congresswoman has been up for 3 hours already having meetings and showing her face on camera with a full face on, so I have absolutely no excuse.
In addition to your internships, you're also involved in other areas like the Dean's Student Leadership Society and the College of Arts and Sciences. What other things have you gotten involved with and found ways to give back to the community through?
When I was a freshman and I had a lot more time, I was a part of Forging a Movement FAM at USF, and it's the Filipino Student Association's hip hop team. I'm not Filipino, but they're very accepting and amazing people. And if I had the time for it, I would still be doing it. But we went to a competition and we didn't place, but we placed in our hearts because the friendships I made there really got me through beginning of college. And while I was doing the Tallahassee Internship Program, I mentioned this part where I was here in the beginning doing class before we got shipped off to Tallahassee. And during that time, I interned with Feeding Tampa Bay under Lorena Hardwick, who is the head of government relations for Feeding Tampa Bay. And there I learned about what Feeding Tampa Bay is all about and how much of a demand there is and how food scarcity is in Tampa.
Mhm.
And I was a government affairs intern, so I searched for town hall meetings that would prepare Lorena for what the community needed and demographic information. So I learned a lot there.
That's really cool because I think you're bringing your work in public service into your extracurriculars. I love the dance fam. I mean, that's incredible. That sounds like so much fun. But also scouting things for your jobs that you're working while doing something that you're passionate about is really special. And I'm so glad you found that. And it kind of goes back to the honors college and thinking about interdisciplinary courses. Honor students often focus on interdisciplinary thinking. How has that perspective helped you in understanding public issues and extending out into the community?
So the work that I do is apolitical. That's more of the legislative side in
Mhm.
DC. So when people call asking for a certain stance on something, I'm A, not allowed to give one, but B, being in honors, I took this class. It's called Girls Bildungsroman Growing Up and Down, but basically it was a feminist literature class. And it gave me this perspective on how covert misogyny is everywhere. And even in everyday situations, like being in a meeting and the conversation being about football versus
Mhm.
it being about hair products, that is an example of how the patriarchy kind of dominates in the world. And so bringing it back, when someone calls asking me for a stance on something, knowing how to see things that aren't very obvious and looking deeper into things and finding contesting perspectives, that's something that honors definitely helped me hone as a skill, because the covert misogyny thing, you don't see that unless you're
Mhm.
taught to kind of look deeper into the world and what people are saying. And so with these hot button political topics, there might be a headline that catches your attention and you might feel a certain way about it, but until you actually read in on what's going on, you would have no idea what the perspectives are and who it's actually hurting and helping.
Yeah, I love that you're kind of highlighting the nuances in our honors class because I feel like even with the ones that I've taken, nothing is black and white.
Mm-hmm.
There's always gray area, and the gray area is what we focus on. And I think you don't find that as much in your major classes, where, for example, like I'm learning chemistry or I'm learning about the healthcare system, and it's very factual, versus here we spend a lot of time learning nuances and spending time examining those in big detail. I don't know, Lily, if you've had that same experience.
Yeah, a little bit. Being a mass communication major, we look at a lot of, what you're supposed to do and very structured lessons, whereas I think the honors college does a really good job at letting you make the most out of your class and get out of it what you want to. And I think looking for that nuance has also been something that I've experienced in the honors classes specifically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, STEM-based majors and technical majors, you're taught this is the way, this is the
Mhm.
answer, versus in an honors class, you're surrounded by other people that are just like you, that have the same intent going into that class, that we're going to learn nuanced perspectives. And it's more presented as, have you ever considered this? Or have you heard of this idea? And that is when the discussion really starts. And what I like about honors is that we have discussions with conflicting points of view rather than a professor saying, this is the way, this is the technical rule that you have to follow. And that was really good for me.
And so to wrap this up, what advice would you give to current honors students who want to get involved with public service or government work?
Definitely apply to our internship program. We have two. One of them is in DC, one of them is in the district office where I work, and applications are open for both spring and summer. And that is probably your best way to get your foot in the door. The main requirements for someone getting into public service, wanting a full-time position, is local ties, experience, and communication skills. I was going to say people skills, but communication skills is a better word.
Yeah, I always love that advice of just do it, just get involved, because you never know what connections you can make and what an impact you can make by through just one internship, kind of like how you have. Thank you so much, Cameran, for joining us. It was a pleasure to have you.
It was great meeting you both. Thanks for having me again.
All right, everybody, thank you for joining us back in the studio. Riva, what were your thoughts on the podcast?
I really liked it. I love how she joined a dance club here at USF while still bringing her passion for public service and showing up every day, all within a really short undergraduate career. What
I
about
think
you?
learning how to be that well-rounded student is really important, and whether that's being involved with dance or getting a internship in Congress is a great opportunity to get to do a little bit of all the fun parts about college. And with that said, if you're interested in learning more about the Lip and Tip programs, check out the Honor Roll newsletter and our website, usf.edu/honors, for upcoming events, updates, and news.
That'll do it for this week's episode. The Honor Roll podcast is recorded in the Judy Genshaft Honors College at the University of South Florida, Tampa campus. Production assistance is provided by USF students Sandra Napolitano, Bama Shah, and Nicholas Henry. Thank you all so much for listening. Please do not forget to rate and review our podcast. We appreciate your feedback. Please join us next time to hear more honor stories and talk to members of the Judy Genshaft Honors College.
Until next time, go Bulls!
I'm saying it like a commercial.